Hello everyone, this is your friend Uzumkai Universe 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Kakashi adopted a reincarnated girl who remembered her past life? Part 3. Deep breaths. In. Out. In. They're trying to kill us. Out. They're going to hurt us. We need to hurt them first. In. Out. Mother's anger churned beneath his skin, and Gaara clenched his teeth so hard they hurt. No. He couldn't lose control. Not here. Not now. Not yet. Cool chakra seeped into his edges of his awareness. Worry, fear, and anger whirled around his mental periphery. TCH. That little chit. What does she think she's doing? Oh, she's mad at me. Interesting. Mother's voice crooned. Gaara, if you don't hurry, your new friend is gonna die. What? Gaara opened his eyes, but saw nothing. His sand had encased him in a protective dome. He could hear muffled voices from outside, one of them clearly the leaf kunoichi with the gentle chakra. She was weird. She was very short, like him, and reserved, only speaking when spoken to and then in a quiet voice which barely grated his nerves. She had surprised both him and Mother by reaching out with her chakra, the soothing sensation of running water dulling the edge of their anger. Well, Gaara's anger. Mother didn't like her very much, but so long as she didn't push, and she never did, she was content to ignore the polite invasion. Gaara had done the same, at first, but had quickly become curious. Why was she doing this? Was she doing it to the others? Was she really that sad, or was that just how other people's chakra felt compared to his? Would she stop if he tried it? The answer was no, she wouldn't, though he had only just tried reciprocating when they were attacked. With a shaking hand, he willed the sand to part. Light trickled into the dome, and slowly the kunoichi's narrow back came into view. She was standing between him and another person, hands raised up defensively. Even think about hurting him. Her voice was clear and firm, with a weight to it he hadn't heard before. Her opponent scoffed, and Gaara's blood boiled as he recognized the voice. Stay down, brat, the sand Anbu said. That monster needs to be taken out. Had his father sent forces after him? Were the Chunin exams just a ruse meant to lower his guard? The only monster I see is the grown man attacking a pair of children. Gaara watched as she widened her stance, the light of the sun glinting off of something in her hands, weapons, most likely. He couldn't see her face, but her words alone were probably enough to twist the Anbu's expression like that. Shut it, leaf scum. You don't know what you're talking about. He pulled a kunai from his pouch, twirling it with a menacing chuckle. I gave you a chance to run, kid, so don't blame me for this. He's going to kill her. Kill him first. We need his blood. Gaara clutched at his head, struggling to keep his eyes on the conflict in front of him. The kunoichi held her ground until the last possible moment, twirling out from under the larger man's speedy charge. She hooked a foot around his ankle as she went, disrupting his balance and sending him falling right into Gaara's sand. The man's eyes widened comically as the golden dome swarmed around him, encasing him within itself. Crush him. He tried to hurt us. Make him bleed. Gaara-kun, wait. Small hands and gentle chakra took hold of him and he looked down into imploring black eyes. He hadn't noticed before, but now that she was close he could see faded freckles and a beauty mark under her left eye. Her brows were scrunched in what he might have called fear if her chakra wasn't laced with concern. Why? It was all he could get out without growling in her face. Listen, she commanded gently. Do you hear that? He listened. Heard nothing. Said so. Exactly. Where's everybody else? Why aren't they here, helping us? It doesn't make any sense. She leveled a glare on their attacker. We need his information. Oh ho. What will the little Li Fling do? Will she make him bleed? She removed her hands from Gaara's arm, and for the first time he realized she had gotten past his defenses. True, there was a greater threat, but his sand wasn't normally so discriminating. She placed her hand flat against the ground and a puff of smoke filled the air around her. When it cleared, several dogs dressed in ninja paraphernalia sat at attention. Sano, Tetsu, she said sternly to a collie with a Konoha headband and bandages wrapped around its legs and a Shar-Pei in a vest. I need you to find our friends. Do not engage in combat. Report back to me once your targets have been located. Yes, Princess. They leapt up into the trees without a sound. Right away, Princess. The dog poofed from existence. The kunoichi heaved a great sigh before turning back to Gaara, a smile in her eyes and relief in her chakra. That should cover most of our bases. Now, she turned a stern eye on their captive. To deal with this one. I hope she hurts him, makes him bleed. She stepped up to their attacker, not at all perturbed by the sand swirling around her. Gaara-kun, she called over her shoulder. I don't suppose you can get his mouth open. I want to be sure he doesn't have a suicide pill on him. Ooh, what do you know? The brat has a brain. Without prompting, the sand holding the man in the air began to converge around his face, slipping underneath the cloth mask. He gagged on sand, struggling feebly against its grasp. The sand retreated, bringing with it a small white sphere which it deposited into the surprised kunoichi's hands. Oh, thank you. She pulled a small cloth bag from her pouch and placed the pill inside, drawing it closed with a flourish. Now, then, Shinobi-san, I don't think I need to tell you just how foolish all this is, right? She placed a hand on her chest and Gaara's eyes widened involuntarily as the black shirt beneath her haori began to glow. Then, to his horror and mother's amusement, she pushed her hand into her chest, her arm disappearing up to her elbow. The Anbu made a strangled noise, eyes fixed on the unnatural sight. Oh, my, I didn't think there were any of that kind left. How interesting. Gaara watched as she pulled out a leather roll, the glow fading slowly until her shirt was black once more. She kneeled in the grass, unrolling what looked like an artist's kit, with brushes and inkstones tucked neatly into pockets. Gaara-kun, she said softly, looking over her shoulder with kind eyes. Before I start anything, what do you want to do with him? You were his target, after all. Quote, kill him, make him bleed. He agreed wholeheartedly, his rage bubbling to the surface again. Anyone who tried to hurt him died immediately, no questions asked. She was right, though. There was information to be gained here, the vital kind if the pervasive silence of the forest around them was any indication. What are you going to do? She her head at him, looking for all the world like one of her dogs. Oh, I plan on using some seals on him. Just to make him cooperate. There are bloodier ways of doing that. You don't need seals for that. She sighed. I know what you're implying, Gaara-kun, but, please, try to understand, violence and killing are against my religion. Boo. Boring. What kind of religion makes such awful demands of its followers? What is your religion? She looked up at him. Oh, it's called Ninshu. Mother was silent. It's an old religion, she continued as she began grinding ink, her movements slow and methodical. One which focuses on empathy and peaceful resolution of conflict. It goes hand in hand with my Nindo, so it was a simple addition to my life. There isn't a lot out there about it though, so I've been mostly doing my own thing. She laid out a paper tag, small stones holding it in place on the grass as she began to draw the seals. He watched, transfixed, as the seal took shape. Thin, crisp lines began to fill the white paper, taking shapes he couldn't recognize. What will that do? Her hands were steady as she answered. This one will compel him to tell the truth, and I'll make another one that will make him answer questions. Together, they'll force him to give us honest information. Why do we need it? We could just kill him. She nodded with a hum and he could feel the rebuke in her chakra before she voiced it. Yes, we could, but that doesn't mean we should. Actions have consequences, Gaara-kun. I know it may be hard to believe, but even men who attack children unprovoked can have people who love them, who'll miss them when they're gone. Just because he's mean to us, doesn't mean he isn't good to other people. They may not know what kind of person he really is, and even if they do, they'll still grieve. He hurt us, but it wasn't permanent. Death is. Mother was unusually quiet, but Gaara still scoffed. That's ridiculous. He knew what he was risking when he attacked me. Maybe. That doesn't mean you have to stoop to his level. She picked up her finished seals, blowing on them lightly. He may be willing to end a life to fulfill his own agenda, but that doesn't mean I have to be. Here, bear some of his skin, will you? His sand moved to comply, exposing the man's torso. She placed the seal tags on him with a satisfying whop, the paper sticking of its own accord. There, that should do it. Do you want to ask the first question? He's from your village, after all. Gaara looked at her sharply. How did you know that? She shrugged, running nimble fingers through her curls and sending a few leaves and twigs to the forest floor. He stands like Tamari, so I figured he was probably trained similarly. She scrunched her nose. And he smells like sand. Despite himself, Gaara laughed. Shikaku Nara knew a lot of things. He knew where the herds were probably grazing. He knew the formula to the Akamichi food pills. He knew his son was smarter than him. He knew Yoshino would murder him if she ever found his stash. He also knew that seeing Momiji appear in the Hokage's office twice in 1 week was a very bad sign. Hokage-sama, the dog said with a bow of her head. Princess sends urgent news. Sarutobi smiled a little around his pipe, no doubt glad to be freed, however momentarily, from the small mountain of paperwork the dog was now sitting on. Report. Hi. Princess and her team retrieved the team from Suna and began their return trip a few days ago. However, they have been attacked. I don't know why or by whom, but she sent me here to inform you, regardless. Shikaku straightened from his slouch. Is she okay? The dog turned big brown eyes on him. Yes. She and one of the Sand Genin were together when I left. They had been separated from the others, but she sent out Sano and Tetsu to investigate. They also managed to apprehend one of their attackers using one of the Sand Boy's techniques. How far are they from here? 2 days' travel, maybe 1 if you hurry. Shikaku turned to the Hokage, ready to ask for permission to go to his student's aid, but the older man was already nodding, waving a hand dismissively. Go, he said grimly. Those genin are the Kakage's own children. We would be remiss if we didn't react accordingly. Shikaku bowed quickly and left the office at a decent clip, mind whirling. The click of nails on wood had him looking down at Momiji. Princess told me to accompany any relief forces, she said, probably reading his mind with the power inherent in all females. He hummed, then stopped. Can you find Kakashi? I'm pretty sure his team is still in the village. Have him meet me by the gate if you can, come alone if you can't. I'll wait for 10 minutes. Hi. She disappeared in a puff of smoke and he wondered idly if poofing in and out of existence ever got tiring. He left the building through a conveniently open window and leapt across the rooftops toward the village gate. Who would attack a joint team of Konoha and Suna Genin and their Junin senseis? While higher-ranking ninja could probably take on one team, 2 posed a unique challenge. According to Momiji, Hanako was okay, but there was no word on Guy and his students. While it was highly unlikely that Guy would be brought down by anyone, the Genin were a different story. The Hokage said the Sand Genin were the Kakage's kids, but that didn't really mean anything to him. What were their abilities? How old were they? What skills did their Junin sensei have? There were too many variables. Yo. Shikaku looked up, only just realizing that he'd made it to the gate. Kakashi was standing under it, his hand raised in greeting and his expression deceptively casual. Momiji was sitting on his shoulder, looking for all the world like she belonged there. Kakashi, he said, coming to stand beside the younger Junin. I assume Momiji told you. Yep. Is it just us? Do we need more? Kakashi huffed a little laugh. Ma, I guess we are a bit overkill as it is, huh? Shikaku smiled grimly. Oh, definitely. They said little after that, launching themselves into the trees without hesitation. The silence and repetitive motions lulled his mind, and he found himself thinking again. Who would attack Might Guy? He was a well-known figure with entries in most bingo books. His bounty was certainly high enough to be tempting, but there was a reason no one ever tired to collect it. Could someone be after Neji's Byakugan? Kumo had tried for it once before, and they were sending a team to the Chunin exams this year, too. Would Kumo risk a war with both Konoha and Suna, though? A was an ass, but he wasn't stupid. Could the Cage's children be the targets? It would make sense if someone was trying to stir up tensions between Konoha and Suna. If anything happened to those kids, the Cage would be within his rights to demand compensation and the Hokage would be hard-pressed to deny him. That being said, it was no secret that Suna also desired Kekkei Genkai of their own. They may also be trying to get their hands on the Byakugan and stir up trouble between Konoha and Kumo while they were at it. Of course, there was another option, but he was loath to truly consider it. After serving as Hanako's sensei for a year, Kakashi had finally deigned to tell him of her true origins. It had left him with more questions than answers, if he was being honest, but it also raised some troubling possibilities. Someone had hunted her mother down. He'd read the autopsy report, and many of her injuries were already old when she died, made worse by continued stress and movement. Kakashi also admitted, after another year or two, that Hanako was still afraid someone would come for her. Had they? Was this attack meant to finish what her mother's killers had started? It wouldn't be hard to figure out where she was, if someone looked. According to Kakashi, she looked almost exactly like her mother. Was that why she wore the mask? To hide from her enemies? Had it even made a difference, if they found her anyway? There were too many variables. For now, all he could do was postulate. He'd accomplish nothing by thinking himself into a corner. Better to wait until he had more information before latching on to any one idea. Forcing himself from his introspection, taking eye on his surroundings. The sun was low on the horizon, purple sky peeking through the canopy. The breeze was cool with the promise of night and autumn, with the hesitant beginnings of insect song rising up beneath their feet. Ma, you sure took your time, Kakashi drawled beside him, Momiji still perched neatly on his shoulder. The other man wore an expression Shikaku might have called amused, if his daughter's life weren't hanging in the balance. Think up anything useful. Shikaku scoffed. Nothing I can confirm. Kakashi didn't reply, instead turning his head to listen to something Hanako's summons whispered in his ear. He nodded, then met Shikaku's eyes. This way. Shikaku changed direction without complaint. 2 days of standard travel for Genin-level shinobi typically amounted to around 2,000 kilometers of distance covered. For 2 elite Junin, that distance was easily covered in half the time, if not less. Soon, all the variables would be laid bare and he could actually start planning. Kakashi smelled them before he saw them, the coppery sweet tang of blood slipping through his mask with ease. He and Shikaku alighted on a branch high above a clearing. Down below, his self-proclaimed rival sat beside Neji Hyuga and what must have been a genin from Suna. They were all haggard, and Guy sported a bandage wrapped around his thigh. 2 corpses lay discarded off to one side, face down in the dirt. He made to jump down, only to be stopped by Shikaku's outstretched arm. The older man set dark eyes on him. Do you hear that? Kakashi stilled himself and listened. Oh, there's a sensory seal, he muttered, only now realizing that, despite their moving mouths, he couldn't hear anything from the people below. Only audio. Shikaku hummed. It looks like it, though we may be out of range of the visual effects. That was likely. Momiji. He'd forgotten about her, leapt down from his shoulder onto the branch beside them. Princess sent out Sano and Tetsu to look for them, she said softly, her voice a mix between little girl and yappy dog. I doubt those fools would have considered masking their scents, so it's surprising that they aren't down there. Indeed. Maybe they ran into trouble, he suggested. Guy's mini-me isn't down there, and I imagine there are other Suna nin around here somewhere. You might be right, Shikaku agreed. But right now, we need to dismantle the seals. He looked expectantly at Kakashi. He felt his eyebrows rise. You want me to do it? Don't play dumb, Hitaki. Aside from your daughter, you're the most experienced Fuinjutsu user in the village. The right now went unsaid. I don't know what you expect me to do, he groused. I didn't even notice they were there. We would probably be better off finding my kid and having her do it. Shikaku huffed a laugh. Yeah, you're probably right. Oi. Ignoring Kakashi's carefully crafted hurt expression, Shikaku spoke directly to Momiji. Can you take us to her? She her head to one side. Probably. I don't know what you plan to do once you're inside one of these seals, though. Our advantage comes from being outside them. That was true. Hanako's proficiency with seals was a point of pride for her and Kakashi, both, but could she disable one while under its influence? That wasn't something they'd ever thought to test. If, after an entire day within one, she hadn't freed herself, then she likely couldn't. Damn. He shared a look with Shikaku and he knew the other man had reached the same conclusion, likely in half the time. Kakashi sighed dramatically. Ma, I guess I have no choice, then. Without preamble, he began circling the clearing, looking for the seal's anchor point. Calling it a seal was a bit generous, he mused. It was in all likelihood just a genjutsu being remotely maintained by sealed chakra, freeing up the caster to come and go as they pleased. Setting something like that up would have taken some serious planning. The poor kids walked right into an ambush. Finally, right when he was considering uncovering his Sharingan, he saw it. The glint of metal up above him, reflecting the light of the rising sun, drew his attention. There, the hollow of a tree, sat a kunai, a paper tag tied firmly to its handle. He really did use his Sharingan then, just for a moment. The dojutsu picked out the traps he'd expected, and he deftly disarmed them before ripping the paper from the weapon. Every confidence that our comrades are well and on their way. Rest assured, I shall reunite you with your siblings or run all the way to Suna on my hands. Ah, Guy, the poor seal must have been straining to keep his volume contained. Kakashi took a moment to bolster himself before jumping down into the clearing, landing behind Guy. Yo! His longtime friend jumped in surprise, falling into a comical defensive stance. His fierce expression almost immediately brightened into a wide smile. Kakashi, my friend, what a fortuitous surprise. His bushy brows fell into a confused scowl. I'm going to assume you know what happened. Kakashi jerked his thumb over at Momiji where she and Shikaku landed beside the Suna genin, much to the poor boy's surprise. The kiddo sent her dog ahead. Guy's smile returned before fading. Ah, young Hanako. I am sorry, my friend. I have been unable to find her. I shall perform 10,000 laps around the village as penance. Kakashi held up a hand. Ma, Guy, don't worry about it. She can take care of herself. He looked over Guy's shoulder to the edge of the clearing where another dog was stepping into view. She's trying to take care of you, too, it looks like. The collie, Sonosika, if he remembered correctly, trotted up to them with his tongue lolling. Yo, he said, panting. You guys were hard to find. Momiji sniffed derisively. Did the sensory seal block your nose, too? Sano plopped down onto his belly with a gusty sigh. Is that what it was? I could only follow the trail so far before it started going in circles. So maybe they had guarded against scent. Did that mean they, whoever they were, had known his kid would be with them. Or had it been a general guard against scent-based trackers in general? The Hitaki were hardly the only ones in the village, after all. Can you take us to Tetsu? Momiji asked. I'll bet he's having the same problem. Sano groaned loudly in protest. The Suna genin pointed to the Ninkin with a wide-eyed expression. Are the dogs supposed to be talking? Kakashi managed to contain his snort of incredulity, barely. Ma, does Suna not have Ninkin? They're everywhere in Konoha, you know. The poor boy looked even more confused, but Kakashi didn't feel like explaining further. If he was really that curious, he could ask the dogs, themselves. Shikaku loaded the corpses into a seal of his own, the delicate loops and swirls a familiar design. Together, the 5 of them followed the Ninkin as they lead the way to their packmate. Only 15 minutes of travel at half genin speed had them standing beside a shameful Tetsu. Sorry, boss, the Sharpei said. I failed the princess. Kakashi idly pat him on the head as he turned to Neji. There's a seal filled with chakra around here somewhere. Mind finding it for us? Why use his Sharingan when there was a better dojutsu for the job? One located and dismantled seal later, and Mini Guy was reunited with his sensei. The Suna Genin's teammate, sister, and sensei, Baki, were relieved to see him, but still tense. This is bad, Baki said under his breath to his students, clearly ignorant of Kakashi's enhanced hearing. Gaara's out there alone. We can't risk him killing the girl. Ahem, what? Do you have something to share with the class? Kakashi asked, a smile firmly in place. The 3 Suna nin didn't even hide their surprise, and Shikaku sighed beside him. If you know something we don't, I'd consider telling us. We're going in blind as it is, since none of you bothered to keep anyone alive for questioning. That last bit was more of a grumble than anything else, and Kakashi might have laughed at his expense if his kid's life wasn't apparently at risk. The genin shared a look, both a little green around the gills. Baki cleared his throat. Well, my youngest student is a little, high-strung. He has a tendency to use excessive force and has been known to jeopardize his teammates' safety. He was obviously picking his words carefully, likely downplaying the danger his kid was facing in order to protect his student. Kakashi could understand that, to a certain degree, but it was his kid being threatened here. Well, he said, voice artificially sweet. We'd better go find them, then. Momiji, if you would. Once again, they followed the dogs, the air tense and rife with potential violence. It took them longer to get there, this time, and there were 2 chakra-loaded seals rather than 1. The result was a wider range of visual dampening, and Kakashi felt his hackles rise higher for every second he couldn't see his kid. The odds of these attackers planning for her involvement were rising far beyond comfortable levels. If his hands shook while disarming the traps around the second seal, neither Guy nor Shikaku said anything. And that's how you make a truth seal. You're basically just blocking off their ability to tell untruths, rather than encouraging truths on their own. It's way easier to negate than to promote, so eliminating other options is typically the best way to get what you want. And, just like that, all his gut-twisting apprehension left him in a dizzying rush. There, in another clearing, was his kid. She was kneeling in the grass, leaning over a paper tag with an ink-laden brush. Beside her, a red-headed boy watched as she painted, engrossed in her lecture. Off to one side, a man sat cocooned in sand, head lolling to one side. Well, then, he made to leap down, but was once again stopped by Shikaku. He leveled his foulest glare on the Nara clan head, but it was ignored. Shikaku caught Baki's eye. If your boy is as volatile as you say, maybe you should go down first. The Suna Junin stiffened, eyes wide and face pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but a voice from below interrupted him. I can hear you guys, Hanako called up to them. You may as well come down. Kakashi shot a smug glance at Shikaku and jumped down, moving immediately to place a hand on his kid's head. Yo. She smiled up at him, her happiness clear in her eyes. Hey, Daddy, what took you so long? Ma, kiddo, he chuckled. You're a long ways from the village. Yeah, but you could have had Momiji summon you back. Ah, he hadn't even thought of that. If we'd done that, Shikaku said with a wry smile after touching down. We'd have been trapped within the sensory seal along with you. She her head. Is that what it was? Do you have one with you? Kakashi reached into his pouch to pull one out for her, but Shikaku stopped him. Again. Now's not the time. I see you kept yours alive. She looked over her shoulder at the captive. Of course, we did. We interrogated him, too. She pulled a green folder from her seal and presented it to her sensei with both hands. The Junin commander smiled as he took it. Ah, brat, you're a blessing. She chuffed a short laugh. I'm gonna quote you on that. Don't you dare. She turned to the red-headed boy who'd watched their interactions with placid green eyes. Nay, Gara-kun, this geezers are my dad and my sensei. Dad and sensei, this is Gara-kun. He's my friend. The boy looked at her sharply, lips parting in the smallest indication of surprise. His previously cold expression softened the slightest bit and Kakashi internally lamented. Not another one. Sasuke sighed, his breath warming the mask on his face. He was leaning up against the wall outside the Hokage's office with one leg propped up beneath him and his arms crossed over his chest. Off to one side, his teammates, Naruto and Sakura, were speaking with no regard for the people around them. As usual. Nay, Sakura-chan, the Dobi was saying. What do you think happened? Kakashi-sensei left in such a hurry. It has to be an emergency, believe it. Shut up, Naruto. Sakura flipped her hair and scooted closer to Sasuke, as though he wouldn't notice. It can't have been too terrible, since they called us here as soon as he came back. Don't you think, Sasuke-kun? Sasuke sighed again, leaning his head back against the wall. To be honest, he was also worried. There were few things that could motivate their sensei, and his daughter was one of them. If something had happened to Hana. Tem, doesn't that mask get icky? Do you wash it? Naruto's face was scrunched up and his head tilted in confusion before a wide, blindingly bright smile split his face. Maybe I should start wearing one, too. We'd all match. Oh, come on, Naruto, Sakura sniffed. You'd just take it off all the time to eat ramen or something. Hee. Yeah, you're probably right. Sasuke looked away. He'd gotten a lot of grief when he first started wearing the mask. Hana had, too, but she never seemed bothered by that sort of thing. His fellow students had harped on him much in the way Naruto just had, and his fan club had lamented the loss of his face, blaming Hana for it all the while, before accepting it as a part of his mystique. Girls were strange. They were right about one thing, though. The mask had been Hana's idea. After Kakashi-sensei, it was still weird to call him that. Took him in. They'd shared a bedroom for a good 6 months. It only took her a week to notice he was avoiding the mirrors. It was probably less, but he hadn't noticed her noticing, and she went to her father for a mask. He'd initially refused, so afraid of seeming weak in any context, but her words cut his pride down to size. I imagine the only thing worse than seeing a corpse in the mirror is seeing a murderer. That one phrase told him more about her than any of their conversations before or since. The mask, coupled with a much shorter haircut, lessened the resemblance between him and that man. If it added to his mystique, or whatever, it made no difference to him. The door to the Hokage's office opened, drawing all of Team 7's attention. Their sensei stepped out and raised a hand with a smile. Yo, sensei, where did you go? Sakura asked with a scowl. You didn't even tell us you were leaving. Ma, Sakura-chan, Kakashi held his hands out in front of his as if to protect himself from her anger. It's not my fault. Hana needed my help. He looked over his shoulder almost pleadingly at his daughter who sighed, brows scrunching in a fond display of exasperation. Ma, Daddy, you're such a handful. What the heck? There are more of you. A lot of people spilled out into the hallway, one of them, a taller boy wearing a bodysuit and face paint, looking at Sasuke with wide eyes. The blonde girl beside him rolled her eyes and the red-headed boy simply scowled. Their headbands marked them as Suna ninja, and Sasuke spent all of a moment wondering what they were doing in Konoha before he remembered. Oi! Naruto pointed a finger at the foreigner. What are they doing here? Dobi, Sasuke scolded. We're hosting the Chunin exams, this year. Hana's taking them, remember? The blonde rubbed sheepishly at the back of his head. Oh yeah, haha. Another sigh. Nay, Gaara-kun, Hana said with a smile in her voice. These are my Ni-chan, Sasuke, my friend Naruto, and their teammate, Sakura. Guys, this is Gaara, my new friend, and his big brother and sister. The redhead said nothing, pale eyes passing over them all in favor of lingering on Hana. Oh, geez. He exchanged a meaning-laden glance with his sensei. Good. They were in agreement. Come, we should find our accommodations, the adult with a Suna headband said. Thank you for your assistance, Nara-san, Hataki-san. The Suna group began walking away, with the redhead, Gaara, lagging behind until Hana waved him happily away. Kakashi placed his hands on Sasuke and Hana's heads, ruffling their hair with a chuckle. Well, kiddos, what do you say we meet at the usual training ground in, say, half an hour? We've got a few things to talk about. He shunshined away before they could answer. Great, so you mean we came all the way here for nothing? Not for nothing, Sakura-chan, Naruto disagreed with a frown. We got to see Hana-chan. He wrapped his arms around the smaller girl's shoulders, grinning like a fool. She smiled up at him despite the mess he was making of her hair. I missed you, too, Naru-ni. Sakura huffed and crossed her arms. Well, I'm going home. Sensei probably won't be there for a couple hours, anyway. She was right. Even Hana shrugged in agreement. Kakashi was not a punctual man. So, guys, Hana said as she looped her arms between his and Naruto's. How's life been? They started walking through the halls, Naruto rambling on about anything and everything. They stepped out into the afternoon sun, and Sasuke had to shield his eyes from the light. Meh, same old, Naruto answered with a huff. Ever since our mission to the land of waves, everything's been boring. That's a good thing, Naru-ni. Hana shook her head with a sigh. Exciting missions mean someone's probably in danger. Sasuke knew she was right, but he couldn't help agreeing with Naruto, not that he'd ever say so. He'd improved more on one exciting mission than a dozen boring ones. Ma, you too, she said, clearly reading Sasuke's mind. One day, you'll be grateful for the boring missions. He met Naruto's gaze over her head. Yeah, no, nay, Hana-chan, Naruto said, not so smoothly changing the subject. Are you really taking the Chunin exams this year? She agreed. I think it's about time I gave it a go. Sasuke nodded. You need a team for that, right? Yeah, I don't know who I'll take it with, yet. I'll have to decide, soon, though, so we can train together before the exams start. Naruto's face scrunched up in the way it did when he was thinking really hard. Do you have any ideas who you'll pick? Nope. She popped the pea and slipped her arms out of theirs, running up ahead of them to kick at a loose stone. And I don't want to think about that, right now. Come on, we're gonna be late. Sasuke felt his eyebrow quirk and she wrinkled her nose at him. Come on, we can spar while we wait for Daddy to show up. I have an idea I want to test with my seal and your fireball. That sounded interesting. Nay, Hana-chan, What about me? She put on an obvious show of thinking it over, tilting her head this way and that. Well, I am a little curious about what'll happen to a shadow clone if I swallow it. What do you think? Sasuke smiled beneath his mask, watching his friends as they walked along the path ahead of him. Hana looked over her shoulder at him and extended her hand. Come on, silly. Let's go set things on fire. Yeah, it would definitely be interesting. Allow me to introduce your third teammate, Hanako Hatake. Kabuto smiled at the girl in front of him, bowing slightly. It's nice to meet you, Hatake-chan. I'm Kabuto Yakushi and this is my friend and teammate, Yoroi Akato. Thanks so much for teaming up with us. I know you probably wanted to team up with people your own age. He put on a show of bashfulness, rubbing at the back of his head with a wry grin. Her expression, what little of it he could see, did not change, black eyes boring into his soul. Then, she bowed. Thank you, senpais, for taking a chance on someone as young as me. I'll do my best. Sarutobi watched the interaction with a fond smile, puffing on his pipe as he leaned back in his chair. I don't normally interfere with teams for the exams, but Hanako-chan's circumstances are a bit unique. Thank you for being so flexible. Unique was one way of putting it. Kabuto had very little trouble finding information on the girl. Most of it was public knowledge, after all, and he had a pretty good grasp of her life thus far. After her top secret adoption, she'd proven herself worthy of the Hatake legacy, graduating at 7 and jumping right into an apprentices with the most feared strategist in the 5 great nations. That, coupled with an ever-growing mastery of Fuinjutsu fueled by the second Hokage's notes in her own Kekkei Genkai, made her a threat to a lot of people. And a fixation. Kabuto smiled again. It's no trouble, Hokage-sama. Lots of genin switch up their teams. Besides, I'm pretty sure we're the lucky ones, here. The old man chuckled. I won't keep you. Go on and get acquainted. There's not much time left before the exams. The three of them bowed in sync to the leader of the village. Standing together in the hallway, Kabuto took the lead. So, he began. It looks like I'm the odd one out. He mimed placing a mask on his face. Should I get one, too? For team unity. Yoroi didn't respond, his sunglasses working with his mask to hide all expression. Hanako was little better, looking up at him with irreflective eyes, expression somehow just as blank as Yoroi's. Ma, I don't know, she said, her voice lilting with a surprising amount of humor. This way, people know you're team leader. Kabuto put on his bashful act again. Oh, you think so? Her eyes softened fractionally. They were outside, now, and the sun was setting behind Hokage Mountain. The village was full to bursting with foreign shinobi, and Kabuto had to keep his hackles from rising. What do you two say we go get something to eat? We can discuss our specialties and plan a training schedule. Hanako nodded. That sounds smart. Yoroi chuckled. Don't say that. He has a big enough head as it is. Thus began a bout of carefully crafted banter, the two older shinobi building up the characters they had designed for themselves. Well, Kabuto had designed. Yoroi was just like that. He watched the younger genin from the corner of his eyes, and he knew Yoroi was, too. She fit Orochimaru's description exactly. Short, brown hair, those black eyes, and he wondered just what his master had in store for her. Her Kekkei Genkai was not like the Uchiha's Sharingan, which could easily be removed and implanted at will. Kabuto had never even seen the seal in action, so could not form an accurate image in his mind. Perhaps that was part of the draw. Unanswered questions were Orochimaru's drug of choice, after all. Having a new and interesting mystery to solve might keep him busy for the next decade, at least. Is barbecue alright? He asked, rubbing his neck in false embarrassment for North time that day. They have plenty of options, there. Hanako nodded and Yoroi voiced his agreement. Loudly. The three of them stepped into yakiniku queue and Kabuto asked the hostess for a table for three. Hana-chan. What brings you here? Just as suspected, Asuma Sarutobi's genin team were seated in their regular booth, right by the entrance. This was a prime opportunity to observe how the Hitaki heir interacted with people she was on friendly terms with. Oh, Ino-chan. Hello. Hey, guys, Asuma-sensei. The Nara boy raised a hand in a lazy wave and the Akamichi simply nodded before digging back into his meal. The Yamanaka got up out of her seat and wrapped an arm around the smaller girl. Don't you, Ino-chan, me. Who are these guys, huh? You hitting up the older boys while your dad can't see? Ahem. Kabuto turned his genuine surprise into yet another display of embarrassment while Yoroi guffawed outright. Before he could say anything, Hanako huffed loudly through her mask. Ino-chan. I'm 11. I'm pretty sure that would be illegal. The blonde pouted as Hanako turned abysmally dark eyes onto the men behind her. These are my teammates for the Chunin exams, Kabuto Yakushi and Yoroi Akado. We're having a team meeting. The Hokage's son perked up a bit at that. Oh, what a coincidence. I signed these brats up this morning. This isn't fair, Ino whined. How come Hana-chan gets older teammates? It's not like we'd stand a chance even if she didn't, the Nara boy said with a long, drawn-out sigh. She'd cream us all on her own. Interesting. Shikaku Nara was the current head of the Nara clan and, as his student, Hanako would have spent a great deal of time among his people. It wouldn't be remiss to say they had fostered her, though that practice had long fallen out of favor among the shinobi clans of Konoha. If this boy, clearly the clan heir, spoke so highly of her, it was probably true. The Nara didn't mince words. Whatever. You have to say that because she's your girlfriend. Anything that comes out of your mouth is biased. Or not. Both the Nara and Hanako wore identical put-upon expressions. We're not dating, Ino-chan. Sure you're not. Ma, I hate to cut this short, but I think our table is ready. It was. Lucky them. Hanako bowed her head once they were seated. I'm sorry about my friends. They can be a little much, sometimes. Kabuto raised his hands placatingly. Don't worry about it, Hitaki-chan. My friends can be like that, too. Yoroi snorted into his drink. Hanako smiled beneath her mask, the expression softening the intensity of her gaze, though not by much. Thank you for understanding. What kind of meat do you want, Hitaki-chan? It's on me, this time. The implied next time established a foothold for further contact. Oh, just tofu, for me. I'm a vegetarian. Ho. That was unexpected. The Hitaki were one of two dog clans in the village, and the Inuzuka often bore more resemblance to their ninkin than their fellow shinobi. Although Kabuto had never interacted directly with Kakashi, he had assumed there might be some similarities if only because of the history of intermarriage between the two clans. Perhaps this was a remnant of her life before the village. Little was known about her before the Hokage all but forced her onto Kakashi, and nothing she said could be verified. Oh, really? He said with a polite smile. Can I ask why? Ma, there's not really any special reason, she replied, looking down and away in what could only be a deliberate show of discomfort. I just think that, when I have the option, I shouldn't choose to end a life. Her eyes widened in theatrical realization. Not that I care if you do it. Feel free to order whatever you want. If he hadn't been vigorously trained, first by Danzo en route, then by Orochimaru, he might have been fooled by her animated display. But he could tell she was faking it, even with the mask. Those eyes never changed. Well, that's good to know, he said kindly. And it's a nice worldview to have. And a surprisingly naive one. Her little speech on extending hands before raising them was recorded in her file, of course, but to think it went so far. Less surprising was how quickly she'd realized he was assessing her. Yoroi, having lost patience with their conversation, hailed the waitress and rattled off an order. Tell us, Hitaki-chan, Kabuto said once their food arrived. What are your specialties? He already knew, of course, but knowing what she thought they were would be useful. Well, I'm pretty good at fuinjutsu, an understatement. My taijutsu is focused on taking people down as quickly and as cleanly as possible, though I don't typically use sharp weapons. Yes, that was on file. I have a summoning contract with Ninken and have heightened senses because of that, so, even without my dogs, I can track pretty well. So she did have canine characteristics. Interesting. I also have a seal on my body. As far as I can tell, it functions like any other storage seal, but it can't be stolen. The seal. One of the main reasons he was even taking the exams. That sounds useful, Yoroi said, taking the initiative for the first time. I'm pretty proficient in Suiten techniques and I can cast a few reliable genjutsu. I'm also partially resistant to chakra-based attacks. A good downplay of his actual abilities. I specialize more in information gathering, I'm afraid, though he had a feeling she knew that. I do have some training in Iryo ninjutsu, so, please, don't hesitate to come to me with any injuries you may sustain. A prime opportunity to get up close and personal with the seal. And I also have a few Suiten techniques under my belt. What a coincidence. I'm also Suiten-natured. She smiled. For real this time, inky eyes glowing with a light from within. We're a water trio. Indeed. That had not been in her file. Hanako took a steadying breath as she and her. Hella suspicious, seriously, were they even trying to be discreet, team approached the academy. She hadn't been there in a very long time, and seeing so many grown, foreign ninja in the halls was a little off-putting. Her nomination slip said the sign-up area was on the 3rd floor, so she, Kabuto, and Yoroi silently began climbing the stairs. At the first landing, they encountered a massive crowd of people struggling to fit into the 2nd floor hallway. Yoroi and Kabuto made a show of joining them. They weren't that gullible, were they? Guys. They stopped and looked back at her with confusion. This is the 2nd floor. They and several other teams around them looked startled. Oh, but the legend says these are the 300 number rooms. It was true. There, on a wall, was a sign marked 300 to 325. Yeah, but we only climbed one flight of stairs. Kabuto put on a thinking face. You're right. Good catch, Hitaki-chan. Her words had set people whispering, but her name had them straight up conversing among themselves. Great. Kabuto, you jerk. They trudged their way up to the actual 3rd floor, followed by a small crowd of foreign genin. Oh, well, the exam room was already pretty full, with several teams clumping together at different desks or against the walls. A flash of red hair caught her eye. Gara-kun. Hello. The Jinchuriki turned black-rimmed eyes on her, expression unchanged. Hanako. She walked right up to him, leaving her teammates to fend for themselves as she smiled up at the slightly taller boy. How are you? I haven't seen you since we got back to the village. Fine. She extended her chakra, pleased to see his was pretty calm. I'm glad. Have you enjoyed your stay so far? His chakra rose in answer to hers, surrounding her with a feeling of summer sun. Hot summer sun, but still. At least it wasn't angry. Translation. Gara might like you, but even he can't stop himself sometimes. Get out while you can. She smirked right back at him. Kankuro-san, are you worried about me? He looked away with a sharp click of his tongue. Tamari laughed at his expense. Gara's face didn't change, but his agitation came through in his chakra. Hanako rushed to soothe him, sending him as genuine a smile as she could conjure. Oh, Hitaki-chan, you know some of the Suna ninja. Crap. She forgot about Kabuto. Letting her smile drop where Gara could see, she turned to her team. Yep. We traveled to village together after I finished a mission to the wind border. Kabuto smiled and bowed slightly. Hello. My name is Kabuto Yakushi and this is Yoroi Akato. We were lucky enough to be put on a team with Hataki-chan for the exams. Before any of the San siblings could respond, if they even planned to, the door to the room opened again, letting in 6 of the rookie 9. Naruto and company really were going to be last, huh? Hana-chan. Ino called, skipping up to her and draping herself across Hanako's shoulders. I should have known you'd beat us here. Shikamaru promptly chose a spot by the door and sat down, Choji plopping down beside him and opening a bag of CS. Kiba came toward her and Ino, a grin on his face, his default expression. Yo, I guess you finally decided to give it go, huh? Hana smiled slightly under her mask, carefully letting a little bit of it show in her eyes. Yeah, figured it was about time, you know. Kiba's smile widened before freezing. He looked over her shoulder to Gaara, face paling as he took a step back. On his head, Akamaru whined. Oh, right. They were afraid of Gaara. She'd forgotten about that. Shino had no such reservations, or, if he did, he didn't show it, nodding his head in greeting. Hataki. Aburame-kun, she returned, smiling for real this time. I didn't know Kurenai-sensei had signed you up. She did. Why? Because, even if we fail, it will be a learning experience. Ho. Well, I wish you the best of luck. Likewise. Hinata said nothing, but Hanako wasn't concerned. She was generally a shy girl, not just when Naruto was involved, and rarely took the initiative in conversation. They exchanged silent nods and that was that. Nay, Hana-chan, Ino pestered, jumping up and down in her impatience. Do you think Sasuke-kun will take the exams? He's gotta, right? Your dad will sign him up, right? Hana sighed, adopting a deadpan expression Shikaku swore looked exactly like Kakashi's. Ma, Ino-chan, I don't know. He hasn't told me anything. The older girl pouted. No fair. What's the point of having a sensei for a dad if you never know any of his secrets? Oh, she knew his secrets, alright. She just hadn't learned them the normal way. Team Guy stepped in next and Hanako braced herself for further bombardment. Nuhu, Ino said, sticking her tongue out at Lee as he made to pounce. It's my turn with Hana-chan. You had her for a whole month. Lee's dramatic tears inspired zero sympathy. Ten rolled her eyes and smiled. Sorry you had to go in my place, she said. I know how much of a handful these two can be. Neji didn't deign to respond, pale eyes scanning the room. Hanako shrugged, once again reaching for Gaara with her chakra. So many people crowding her, and, by extension, his team, had to be straining his patience. It was no trouble, Ten-san. I made some new friends on the way. Phew. Crisis averted. Finally, Naruto and company came in. Ino promptly abandoned her to glomp Sasuke, immediately picking a fight with Sakura. Hanako took the opportunity to breathe. You have a lot of friends, Hataki-chan, Kabuto said with a patently fake smile. They seem really fond of you. Hanako scoffed just loud enough to be heard by her team, Gaara's, and maybe Kiba. Nah, they just like small things. Self-deprecation was a wonderful deflection tactic. Kakashi taught her that. Seeing the trouble brewing between Kiba and Naruto, she sighed and threw an apologetic glance at Gaara. Sorry, she said. I have to go contain my idiots. At least Tamari laughed. Boys. They stopped their roughhousing instantly, separating with sheepish expressions. This is neither the time nor place for such casual attitudes. Sorry, Hana-chan, Naruto said with a grin, rubbing at the back of his head. It wasn't my fault this time, honest. Sasuke had managed to extricate himself from Ino's embrace and was now sidling up close to Hanako, likely planning to use her as a buffer for any other fangirls in the area. Cough Sakura cough. Kabuto stood uncomfortably close, smiling down at the gathered rookies. She's right, you know. You're the most inexperienced group here. There are a lot of people who take offense to your participation. So, Ino asked brazenly, hands on her S. It's not like we made our senseis sign us up. But you are the ones who decided to act on that nomination, Kabuto replied, nonplussed. As your senpai, I feel the need to tell you these things. He squat down and began his card trick routine. Hanako looked away, uninterested. Yoroi also stood to one side, arms crossed. His sunglasses made it hard to know where he was looking, but Hanako had a feeling it wasn't at her. Oh, Hitaki-chan, they're asking about you. Her surprise was genuine as she turned back to the huddle of Konoha Genin. Wait, what? Kabuto chuckled. Your friends are asking about your info card. Should I show them? Hanako shrugged. It's your prerogative, Yukushi-senpai. Your team leader, after all. Something shadowed his gaze, but it was gone in an instant. He turned back to the rookies with a smile. Alright, one Hanako Hitaki, coming up. His chakra brought up her stats on the card. That doesn't look right. Naruto's words were echoed among her friends as they looked at her card. Her stats were less than average, to be honest. Taijutsu, passable. Ninjutsu, meh. Genjutsu, non-existent. Heck, she really didn't look like much, did she? Kabuto rubbed at the back of his head, as was his wont, and Hanako felt his embarrassment was somewhat genuine, this time. Sorry, my cards don't account for Fuinjutsu. Most people don't use it, nowadays. Holy. Look at her missions. Oh, sure enough, listed right there for everyone to see, was her mission record. Well, the public one, anyway. Hannah, you've gone on a ranked missions. She shrugged helplessly. Not on purpose. They just, sorta, ended up that way. Honest. Naruto rubbed at his nose in a display of arrogance. Hey, we know how that goes, don't we, Tem? Sasuke met Naruto's gaze before looking away. Ma, these boys. At the very least she should be grateful Naruto wasn't challenging the whole room to a death match. Hanako stretched her arms out above her head, popping something in her back as she and the other passing genin followed a yelling Anko Mitarashi out of the academy. Well, that was certainly interesting, Kabuto said as he wiped non-existent dirt from his glasses. Had I known, I wouldn't have tried so hard to answer every question. Hanako hadn't tried at all. She distinctly remembered Naruto turning in a blank test and still getting through, so she just turned over her test and waited for the hour to be over. It proved a good opportunity to go over her plan for the Forest of Death. She'd long ago familiarized herself with Training Ground 44, letting her dogs loose among the trees so they could scope it out, too. She knew how to get to the tower in its center from every gate, the nesting grounds of every dangerous beast, and, most importantly, where all the Anbu emergency tags were hidden. The only issue was her team. It would likely be impossible to interfere with Orochimaru's plans with his henchmen on her tail. With a sigh, she reached into her seal, the pain of activation an old, familiar ache. She pulled out an icy cold can of tea and popped the tab. Huh, where'd you get that? She turned to Kankuro with wide eyes, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand and hiding her face with the motion. You want one? He blanched as she pulled out another one, flinching comically back as she held it out to him. Tamari rolled her eyes and took it. Thanks, Hitaki. Herkin opened with a hiss and she took a shallow sip. Does that hurt? Hanako looked down at her chest. Yeah, actually. I'm used to it, though. The taller girl looked like she might say more, but Naruto's nonsense with Anko drew everyone's attention. Some things just couldn't be changed, huh? Hanako's focus narrowed on the Kusa ninja with the tongue. You. Had Orochimaru already taken her face? Was that him, right there? Was there anything she could do to keep him away from Sasuke and Naruto? Good luck, you guys, she said to the Suna team, voice carefully casual. See you on the other side. She and her team walked through the crowd and passed maybe Orochimaru. Hanako kept her gaze set dead ahead, not even sparing a glance for who might be the catalyst of nearly every canon conflict from then on. She accepted her waiver and approached the hut against the fence to turn it in. Once she, Kabuto, and Yoroi had officially signed their lives away, they were supplied with an earth scroll. Kabuto looked down at her with a smile. "I'll leave this to you, Hitaki-chan." She took it and made a show of placing it into her thigh pouch. When both her hand and the scroll were concealed, she activated the seal on her palm and swallowed the scroll. That done, she pulled out her hand and buckled the pouch closed, meeting Kabuto's eyes with a nod. The three of them walked up to gate 38 and Hanako had to take a deep breath to steady her mounting anxiety. She'd spent the last 6 years planning almost exclusively for these exams, but those years had also made it clear that canon wasn't set in stone. Orochimaru wasn't a character that popped into being the moment Kishimoto introduced him. He was a living, thinking being capable of adapting to new and changing situations, like the ones Hanako's existence likely created. The butterfly effect is way scarier in reality. Hopefully. Wait, no, that's awful. Orochimaru's depravity was a universal constant. She was brought from her musings by a chunin unlocking their gate, the sound of falling chains echoing as all the other gates were opened, as well. And they were off. Kabuto led the way up into the trees, leaving the fence and the ground behind. Hanako took up the spot behind him on his left, Yoroi on his right. They leapt from branch to branch, climbing higher and higher until they came to a stop in the uppermost canopy of the forest. The three of them huddled up against a wide tree trunk, squatting in a circle. "All right," Kabuto began, huffing and puffing with theatric fatigue. "We should be safe for a few moments, at least. We have 5 days," Yoroi added. "Many will be trying to get there first. If we hang back, we should be able to pick and choose our fights." Hanako nodded. They were right. "We would do well to stay up here," she said, looking down over the edge of the tree branch. "It gives us a good vantage point, and I know many of the foreign teams will be unaccustomed to traveling in tree cover. How much you wanna bet none of them even look up?" Kabuto nodded, his smile a little more genuine and sly. "Good thinking, Hitaki-chan. So, our plan as of now is to pace ourselves and stay high up. Anything else?" Hanako hesitated before speaking. "We might want to target the rookies. They're recent graduates and might hesitate to attack fellow Konoha-nin. She'd keep Sasuke out of Orochimaru's hands, even if she had to crush his trust in her to do it." Kabuto and Yoroi gaped at her. "Wow, Hitaki-chan," Kabuto laughed. "That's really cold." "Ma," she shrugged. "I'm on your team, not theirs." "Yes." Kabuto's voice dripped with approval and Hanako resisted the urge to shudder under the weight of his suddenly too focused gaze. "Yes, you are." Bleg. She shifted her weight, falling onto one knee. "I have a plan to throw people off our trail, if you're interested." At Kabuto's nod, she pressed her palm to the wood beneath her, calling up a cloud of smoke. When it cleared, 3 dogs sat among them. "These are my summons, Sano, Tetsu, and Momiji." The dogs nodded when she gestured to them. "They can henge themselves into us and lead any opponents on a false trail. They'll travel with us for at least a day, so they can get a better grasp of your personalities and how you move. They'll also adopt our sense, to throw off any trackers like Kiba and Izuka." Kabuto was nodding along. "They'll also be able to fight without dispelling like clones would." "That's very clever." Well, yeah, she'd only been planning it since she first summoned Momiji. "The princess is always clever," Sano said with a huff. "You plebs can't even hope to compare." "Sano." Hanako pointed a finger at the collie. "No." Tetsu laughed as his pack mate wilted under their master's censure. Momiji rolled her brown eyes. "Boys." Yoroi looked absolutely delighted. "They talk." "Of course, we do," Sano said with a yipping laugh. "What?" Did you think we were like those Inuzuka Ninken? Oh, Momiji scrunched her muzzle. Don't even joke about that. Hanako never did find out why they hated the Inuzuka dogs. Poor Akamaru always looked so put upon whenever Momiji was in the room. Wait, couldn't Sume Inuzuka's dog talk? Right. Kabuto stood, one hand extended down to her. We should find a decent campsite. Setting up a reliable system for securing a perimeter will be our focus for today. Hanako took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. He smiled down at her for a little longer than was comfortable before turning and leaping away. Hanako followed, feeling infinitely safer with her dogs at her side. She let her body fall into autopilot as she ran through her mental file of plans. With the dogs involved, her chances of getting word out if they did run into Orochimaru were much higher. If her memory could be trusted, Kishimoto had the snake attacking Sasuke later that day. If he stuck to that plan, then she had three options: hurry and take out Team 7 herself, hurry and save Team 7, her own team willing, or wait and hope all those years studying seals weren't for naught. She didn't like any of those, but they were all she had. The sudden shouts of her teammates and dogs had her looking up just in time to see the red maw of the snake's mouth as it swallowed her whole. Rude. In hindsight, she probably should have expected this. Really. It made perfect sense. Why go for the Sharingan, a dojutsu he'd studied quite literally to death, thanks to Danzo, when there was a brand new, never before seen, totally non-canon Kekkei Genkai wandering around the forest of death. Being on Kabuto's team made a lot more sense now. Knowing all of that didn't make her situation any less gross, though. It was absolutely nauseating. The grossest. The most gag-inducingly foul. Worst of all, it was in her hair. Ah, she knew how to get out, of course. Who could forget the exploding snake debacle? It wasn't the snake's fault Orochimaru told it to eat her, though. Really. She didn't want to kill it. She might have to kill it. Folding her fingers together, she offered up a prayer for the snake's poor soul before activating her seal. She knew how to create shadow clones, of course, but she didn't have nearly enough chakra to create as many as she would need to burst through the many layers of snakes she needed to escape. She did, however, have a lot of water stored inside her seal. It was mainly for use as fuel for her sweetened techniques, but none of them would help her now. Instead, she was going to let out all the water she'd stored away in the hopes of either replicating Naruto's explosion or, preferably, getting the serpent to puke her up. It was all so nasty. The snake's stomach was illuminated by her seal's blue-white glow, the rising water level casting reflections on the pink walls of flesh in a bastardization of that one scene in Tangled. Hanako took a deep, nauseating breath just before she was submerged and put all her focus into expelling water. Her eyes were closed, so she couldn't really see what, if any, effect her desperate act was having. Honestly, if this didn't work, she had no alternative. Wait. No, she could. As soon as the thought came to her, she was moving. Flowing up and out of the snake's mouth with a torrent of water, Hanako found herself on her hands and knees in the mud, coughing wetly. A squelch had her looking up, eyes wide, and she froze when she recognized the person in front of her. It was the Kusa Kunoichi, or, rather, Orochimaru wearing her face. He licked his lips with that obnoxiously long tongue, clearly doing so for effect. Well, he said with a rasping voice, coming closer with slow, steady footsteps. That was unexpected. Hanako didn't answer. Instead, she reached out with her chakra. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she couldn't help but sigh in relief when she felt no one near. Wait, that wasn't right. Oh, a sensor. No. How interesting. No. That's wrong. How could he get that wrong? She pulled her chakra back and pulled herself to her feet. She didn't bother with a defensive stance. Nothing she did would have any effect on a Sanin. No lasting effect, anyway. As he approached, she let her mind run in the background as she focused on keeping her body relaxed. When he went after Sasuke, he'd used crushing killing intent to paralyze him and Sakura. Killing intent was just ninjutsu, the only kind most ninjas still knew how to use, and she'd requested training in Konoha's torture and interrogation sector specifically to learn how to counter it. So that was dealt with. He chuckled lowly. What? Nothing to say. The snake was still around, but, even if it wasn't, he could always summon more. Her team would not be coming to her rescue, though her dogs might, if they hadn't unsummoned themselves to make sure they were available should she need them. No, it was better to operate on the assumption that she was alone. His smile faded. You know, I expected a bit more snark from Kakashi's hatchling. I'm a bit disappointed. Good. She leapt into the air, bouncing from tree to tree, her chakra-laden hands brushing the bark as she went. Below her, she heard Orochimaru's laughter. Hopefully, he'd be too distracted to notice. Up, up, up she went, spiraling upward toward the canopy. Orochimaru was gaining on her, but she spared him little thought. Right now, her advantage, if she could call it that, lay in her ability to detach herself from the situation. Shikaku had always praised her for it, calling it a skill beyond her years, but she knew the truth. Having lived another life, it was very easy to look at this one with foreign eyes. Like playing a video game, she acted as though her body were apart from her, activating the necessary skill with an absent eye on her mana bar, chakra levels. This technique was purely theoretical, more idea than actual ability, but it was within the realm of possibility and she was fully willing to bend the rule of this new reality to suit her. Anchoring the bottoms of her boots to the underside of a tree branch, she met Orochimaru's smiling gaze with a glare. His killing intent rolled off her like a wave of hot air and she let herself smile in return. Pressing her hands together in the familiar ways, she launched herself downward, using the collected chakra in her hands to recall the myriad of threads she'd attached to the trees during her ascent. Noi tightening, the weave pattern revealed itself, a giant, glowing cocoon closing in around Orochimaru, who'd launched himself straight up while Hanako jumped in circles. It probably wouldn't hold him long, if at all, but it was still satisfying to see an idea come to fruition like that. As the silk threads enclosed the Sannin within their folds, Hanako once again propelled herself upward, activating her seal. Yanking the cocoon toward her, she had every intention of swallowing the snake whole. Alas, it was not to be. The cocoon burst open, the force of the blast throwing Hanako back. Rather than stay and see what he'd done, she borrowed the momentum and began fleeing. She really should have just done that from the beginning, but she had to try. Naruto's shadow clones always popped the instant they entered her seal, despite surviving storage scrolls, so she had no idea what awaited anyone inside. Who better to experiment on than the mad scientist himself? Snakes sidled up to her, huge and angry. She immediately let herself drop down from the trees, using her small size to her advantage and diving through the thick foliage. Above her, the air was filled with the sound of snapping branches and hissing snakes. The exposed parts of her face and hands were riddled with stinging cuts and scratches. Her hair caught on something and she pulled free, heedless of the pain it caused but very aware of the way her headband fell free. She couldn't stop to retrieve it. Hanako's boot caught on a raised root and she was sent tumbling forward. She raised her arms over her head as she rolled, cursing her clumsiness. If she couldn't get her footing back, it was only a matter of time before Orochimaru's snakes caught her, but it would take too much time to actually find her balance. If only she could turn into a human wrecking ball, a la Choji. Then she could maintain her momentum without wasting valuable time getting to her feet. Suddenly, she found herself weightless, her body suspended in air as she rolled right off the edge of a cliff. She barely had time to register the lack of ground beneath her before gravity grabbed hold of her and pulled her down, down, down with alarming speed. She twisted in midair, desperately searching for some way to save herself from her future life as a human tortilla. She unfurled her chakra and reached out wildly. Was there anyone out there? Anything. Even being swallowed again would be preferable to Acme-style flattening. Please. Her back hit the water with a breathtaking whop. The rushing water pulled her along its current, bouncing her on the riverbed like a basketball. She gasped for air reflexively only to choke on grainy water. Mind-fogged by pain and shock, she could do little but go along with the violent flow as her body was rammed against stones many times her size. She flailed, desperately pumping chakra into her hands and feet as she struggled to get up above the water. If she was where she thought she was, then there were rapids downstream. She had to get out of the water before then, or she'd. Chiru. Yukiru. Mo, sweetie, you need to get up. You don't want to miss your papa, right? Yukiru, get under the floorboards and stay there. Don't make a sound. Go. Hurry. Yukiru, mommy loves you. She was alive, that much was obvious. Her head was pounding and her skin was soaked, but she was alive. The water of the river lapped lazily at her back, her legs fully submerged and her face buried in the mud. Her eyes were closed and she had no intention of opening them. Who the hell was Yukiru? Was she Yukiru? Was this body Yukiru's? Had she really hit her head all those years ago? If she hadn't, would she have woken up with all of Yukiru's memories, too? Would she have any of her own? Injury-induced amnesia usually resolved itself pretty soon after occurring, right? That's what Grey's Anatomy told her. Had Yukiru not died? Was she still alive, somewhere, inside her mind? Had Bethany usurped her like a split personality in a horror movie? No, that couldn't be it. She wasn't Yukiru. She wasn't. She was Hanako. Her eyes flew open. With a groan, she pulled deadened limbs underneath herself and painstakingly lifted her head from the mud. There, standing on the bank, was Gaara. The sunlight trickling through the break in the trees set his hair aflame like a bloody halo, hurting Hanako's sensitive eyes with its brilliance. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked up at him. She scrambled to her feet, muscles screaming in protest as she climbed the steep embankment. He stood still, watching stoically as she rushed him, wrapping her arms around his torso and burying her muddy face in his narrow chest. She cried. It was an ugly, snot-running cry, the kind she normally had while locked in her soundproofed room. Orochimaru's borrowed face hung in her mind's eye, obscene tongue raking against her brain. Her hands twisted in Gaara's black bodysuit, shaking with the force of their grip. This was the price for separating her mind from the situation. All the fear and adrenaline hit her at once. Chakra, tentative and thin, wrapped itself around her, covering her terror with a layer of confused sympathy. A slender hand placed itself on her back with the same hesitation. Oh, Gaara. She loosened her grip on him, taking the time to set a smile on her face before pulling away. I'm sorry, she said, wiping at her eyes with muddy sleeves. Her words froze on her tongue as she looked up into his face. His pale green eyes boiled with so much anger that she marveled at his ability to keep it from his chakra. Damn, she'd really stepped in it. I'm so sorry, Gaara. I shouldn't have. Who did this? He raised one pale hand and pressed his fingers against her temple. She winced and fingers came away bloody. Oh no. Damn it. Sho knew how he was with blood. What was she thinking? No one. Really. It was the river. She gestured wildly at the river behind her, stepping back to give him a little space. His hand on her shoulder tightened its grip, halting her. Why are you afraid? His voice was pitched low, and Hanako could feel Shukaku's chakra welling up beneath his own. Who did this? Oh, shit. This was an opportunity. If she told Gaara the truth, she might be able to stop the invasion in its tracks, or, at least, the biggest, scariest part of it. She wanted to tell him, to warn him of Orochimaru's depravity, but. Oi, Gaara, why the heck do you run off like that? Kankuro's voice broke the tension between Hanako and Gaara. Seriously, you know we're supposed to stay. Oh, that's why. Hanako raised a hand weakly in greeting. Hey. Kankuro's false bravado became a little more real when he saw her. Damn, what happened to you? I was eaten by a snake. The puppet master and his sister, who'd walked up beside him, stiffened. Whoa, really? How'd that happen? She sighed, letting her shoulders slump. I don't know if I should say. It's kind of, village sensitive. Gaara's chakra made his agitation known and she let him wrap her up in it. His anger should have been scary, given what she knew he was capable of, but knowing it was for her sake somehow made it less threatening. What? Are they special Konoha snakes? Kankuro's joke fell flat. Even Tamari cast a look his way. Kind of, Hanako said wearily, rolling her shoulders to loosen muscles gone stiff with cold. Oh, heck, I may as well tell you. If he goes after you, we might end up in another war. If who goes after us? She looked Tamari straight in the eye. Orochimaru. There was a spike in Gaara's chakra and she felt her heart fall. So, they did know about him. Damn. Wait, isn't he that Sanin guy? The one who defected? Hanako shook her head. He didn't defect. We kicked him out. She paused for effect. For experimenting on children. That's probably why he wants me, she added, privately delighting in the matching expressions of terror on Kankuro and Temari's faces. I'm the last of my line, you know. Maybe. Gaara's hand on her shoulder tightened painfully and she looked up at him. He was breathing heavily, eyes unnaturally wide. She could hear his teeth grinding. Gaara-kun. His gaze snapped to hers, chakra ablaze with anger. Shukaku's roiling undercurrent was quickly overpowering him. No. She let her own chakra surge up and out of the blanket of anger, encapsulating both boy and beast in what she hoped was a calming presence. She was still shaky with nerves. Slowly, his grip on her loosened. His eyes refocused, and breathing calmed just enough to be noticeable. Gaara. You called me Gaara, before. Oh, she had, hadn't she? That's what she gets for not using honorifics in her mind. Sorry, she said with a small smile. I shouldn't have. It's fine, he interjected, looking her dead in the eye. Call me Gaara. Ma, he really hadn't been socialized, had he? She let herself laugh, placing a hand on his where it still rested on her shoulder. All right, Gaara, then, she sighed again. I should probably go look for my team. We can only pass if all three of are there together. Good luck you guys. I hope to see you in the next stage. Look out for snakes. She made to leave and Gaara finally let go of her. Looking him over, she winced. She'd gotten him all covered in mud. Whoops. Leaping into the trees, Hanako followed the river upstream. Her cry session and the conversation with Gaara had helped level her head somewhat, but there were still things she needed to do before she'd be able to say she was fine. Stopping on a wide branch hanging over the rapids, she pressed her palm to the rough bark. When the smoke cleared, two brown, roly-poly-esque figures sat in front of her, their pudgy tails wagging eagerly. Princess, one of the puppies whined, standing up on his hind legs and propping himself up on her leg. You finally summoned us. His brother yawned loudly. She smiled down at the newest additions to her pack. The mastiff pups were still too young to be out in the field, but she didn't want to risk alerting Kabuto. Besides, this could be a learning experience. Okay, whelps, she said, clapping her hands with a sinister smile. How do you feel about tracking down your Uncle Sano? The pups shared evil smirks of their own. Poor Sanosuke. Sakura stared up at the older genin, heart hammering in her chest. Naruto had been this close to opening their scroll when the silver-haired man grabbed his wrist, appearing out of nowhere. After their fight with the Oto Nin, she'd kept her guard up. Their obsession with Sasuke rivaled her own and it wasn't okay, but he managed to pop up completely undetected. Naruto fell over onto his butt and grimaced as Sasuke ran over to them. "What are you doing?" Kabuto demanded. "Don't you remember the rules?" Sakura watched as Sasuke looked from Kabuto to Naruto and the scroll. His dark eyes were filled with exasperation as he shook his head, sighing heavily through his mask, the black fabric torn from combat with Zaku and revealing a tantalizing extra inch of skin. "I can't take my eyes off you two for a second, can I?" Naruto braced his hands behind his head, not the least bit apologetic. "With a view like this, why would you want to?" Sasuke looked away sharply and Sakura smacked the goofy blonde on the shoulder. "Stupid. Go put your clothes on." He grumbled and trudged over to the pile of clothes, discarded so he could fish without get them wet. Hanako's cute little dog came running out of the bushes, her long-haired ears pinned back in annoyance. "Where's Hana? TCH. Sasuke's normally even voice was thick with concern. Sakura looked around for the younger Kunoichi, but there was no sign of her. Kabuto ducked his head sheepishly. "Ah, about that. We were separated. We followed her trail to a cliff downriver, but it cut off there. Momiji and I decided to continue looking for her while Yoroi and two other dogs head to the tower and wait just in case she heads there." Oh, she was out there alone. The idea that the girl who'd monopolized Sasuke's attention might not make it to the next round of the exam was exhilarating. She was always so perfect, so smart, so talented, so little and cute. That kind of failure would surely knock her down a peg or two. "Don't worry, Tem," Naruto drawled, draping an arm around Sasuke's shoulders with a smile. "Hana-chan's super strong, believe it." Sasuke's expression softened a little. HMMPH, clearly not strong enough not to be separated from her teammates. It was about time she got what she deserved, Shanaru. "Oh, so, this is why my ears were burning." Everyone turned around in shock. There, leaning heavily against a tree, was Hanako Hatake. Sakura's mood soured instantly, but she took a grim sort of satisfaction from the other girl's disheveled state. She looked like something swallowed her. She stumbled over to them, two brown puppies running amok beneath her feet. One of them yelped as she tripped over it, and Kabuto reached out to catch her. "Thank the gods you're all right," he said with a kind smile. "We were worried." She scoffed into his chest. "Ooh, sure you were. Rude much. Wow, Hanako. That's no way to talk to your teammate after he came all this way looking for you." Sakura didn't flinch when Hanako leveled her two black eyes on her, expression tired and devoid of emotion. "He would have been here, anyway." She pushed him away from her, falling to her knees beside the fire Sasuke had set. "Some things can't be changed." What? Being a genius didn't give her permission to be confusing. "I don't know what's wrong," Kabuto said tentatively as he came to sit beside her. "But I'm glad you're okay. We found signs of combat, but no traces of people or the snake that took you. Can I ask what happened?" Sakura blanched when Hanako responded by pulling her grime-covered mask down. There was a clear line of demarcation between the muddy top half of her face and the slightly smudged bottom. Sakura took in her face with all the zeal of a lioness on the hunt, only to be left wanting. There was nothing wrong. Why the heck would anyone cover their face unless there was something they didn't want people to see? All her theories, hairy moles, buck teeth, an ugly scar, came to nothing. It wasn't fair, Shanaru. How could she be so normal? Hanako ran a filthy hand over her face. "You know that chick with the tongue. The Kusa lady," Naruto supplied from his spot on the other side of the fire. "That's the bitch." Hanako seemed oblivious to everyone's scandalized reactions. "It turns out the snake that ate me was her summons." She got me alone and tried to goad me into conversation. She didn't even try to attack me until I made a move. Her team was nowhere in sight, and she didn't even try for the scroll. She shook her head. Whatever she was trying to accomplish, she clearly didn't think it through. Wait, you were eaten? Sakura asked, aghast. Hanako chuckled dryly. I don't recommend it. Ugh, gross. Ah, Hitaki-chan. Kabuto reached into his pouch, bringing out a heaven scroll. Momiji and I managed to find this. The team it belonged to had apparently been killed. What? A chill fell over Sakura's body. Who would kill a team just to leave their scroll? That didn't make sense. Hanako accepted the scroll and put it in her thigh pouch. Her eyes glowed and Sakura knew she'd used that icky seal of hers. Ugh. She hated watching her use it. It gave her the worst kind of goosebumps. You said Yoroi and the boys are waiting at the tower, right? Are Sano and Tetsu disguised as us? At Kabuto's nod, Hanako pushed herself to her feet with a groan. Alrighty, then. I'm not going anywhere until I've had a nap and washed the snake gunk from my hair. Oh, and I have a head wound you should probably look at. She started walking away from the little makeshift camp. Where are you going? Sasuke called after her, looking for all the world like he might follow. HMPH. To take a bath, that stopped him in his tracks. Like I said, this stuff is gross. Sasuke looked really torn, and Sakura sensed an opportunity. She shouldn't go off on her own, she said with a smile. I'll go with her. Sasuke nodded, expression easing. Yes. Take that, Hanako. Sakura practically skipped after the shorter girl only to stop in her tracks. There, standing barely out of Sasuke's sight, was a half Hanako. And she was getting more. What are you doing? Sakura demanded, rushing to her side. Someone might see you. Hanako huffed as she kicked off her boots. Right, because 11-year-old girls are so attractive. Sakura inhaled, totally prepared to scold her sensei's daughter with all the might her 1 year's seniority gave her, when she noticed the bruises. Bright red blotches covered Hanako's skinny body, contrasting horribly with her pale skin and black tattoos. As she undressed, she revealed more bruise than skin. Gods, Hanako, Sakura whispered. What happened? The small girl pulled a bottle out of her seal, blue light fading from her eyes as she met Sakura's worried gaze. I might have taken a tumble of a cliff into the rapids downstream. What? Hanako, that's horrible. How can you say it so simply? She shrugged, dunking her head in the frigid river water. I'm still kind of in shock, to be honest. It'll be a miracle if I even remember this conversation. She poured the contents of the bottle onto her head and began to scrub with concerning fervor. Sakura wasn't sure what to say to that. Sure, she'd never really liked her sensei's kid, but she didn't want to hurt her, no matter how much inner Sakura said otherwise. She wanted her out of the way, yeah, but not dead. Seeing someone as small as her, so young and bird-boned, with so many bruises was disconcerting to say the least. Hanako dunked her head back under the water, rinsing the shampoo from her hair. Do you want some? She asked, holding the bottle out to Sakura with her eyes closed. I see you joined the short hair club. It looks good. Ah, thanks. Sakura awkwardly accepted the shampoo, biting her lip in consideration. Her hair was feeling awful greasy, and it would be nice to wash out any errant pieces of hair still clinging to her after her impromptu makeover. The memory of Kin's hand in her hair had her shuddering, and she was once again grateful Sasuke and Naruto managed to get her out of there before she could be seriously hurt. Like Hanako. Whatever. She wasn't going to remember this, anyway. Keep a watch out for perverts, she told the other girl as she untied her Hitai-8. You may be an exhibitionist, but I have morals. Hanako ran alongside Kabuto and Team 7, Momiji on her back, and the pups safely returned to the summoning realm, despite their many protests. Clean, dressed in a fresh set of clothing conveniently stored in her seal, and her head wound healed by Kabuto's Iryo ninjutsu, she felt much better. Sakura had brought her up to date while they washed up, telling Hanako about the Oto Nin's attack on Sasuke. Luckily, Orochimaru had gone after her instead of the Uchiha, so both he and Naruto had been able to fight them off. Sakura still cut her hair, though, and Hanako was a little glad her meddling hadn't robbed the other girl of her first big step toward character development, one of the only ones Kishimoto had ever given her, the miser. The closer they got to the tower, the higher their chances of being ambushed became. She knew something else happened to the team in canon, but she couldn't remember what. Without warning, she felt a nauseating film drape over her mind. A genjutsu. Luckily, the seal on her mind which rendered her immune to the Yamanaka hidden techniques also granted her some immunity to most basic illusions. Unfortunately, because of this, she'd never felt the need to study them and would likely fall victim to one cast by anyone with actual skill. Everyone needed a weakness, right? Privately resolving to add genjutsu to her study regimen, she reached up and flicked Momiji's ear. The dog startled. What was that for? Hanako held a finger to her lips, raising an eyebrow in silent signal. The group stopped for a breather and she seized her chance. Gimme a sec, I'll be right back. She turned her back on the group and ducked out of sight, followed only by the sound of Sakura explaining why no one should follow her. Hey. Once they were alone, she and Momiji exchanged a heavy glance. Forming the hand sign for Kawarimi, Hanako waited until the Papillon's brown eyes widened in understanding. In the next instant, they'd traded places, human and dog conveniently hanged into each other. Hanako then Kawarimi'd with a cluster of leaves she'd loaded with chakra a few trees back, filling the air with smoke as she left. To anyone watching, it would look like Momiji had unsummoned herself. And there were people watching. She'd forgotten the details of the attack on the way to the tower, but she did remember Naruto exposing his massive chakra reserves to Kabuto as a result. They all got out of it okay and everyone made it to the next round, so she didn't have to worry about them. Dropping her henge as silently as she could, she leapt higher into the trees, falling back on the knowledge that most of the shinobi participating in the exams hailed from lands without significant tree cover. Most of them wouldn't instinctively know to look. Following behind her group, she kept a diligent eye out for whoever cast the genjutsu. So far, they were doing a pretty good job of staying hidden. Pulling down her mask, Hanako scented the air. Leaves, dirt, animals, people, nothing that didn't necessarily belong. Drat. Covering her face, she watched as the others began wandering in circles, no doubt caused by the genjutsu. Then, they stopped and began shadow boxing. The illusion must have changed to include combat. A kunai flew from the trees, grazing Kabuto's arm. Aha! Hanako quickly made her way to the kunai's point of origin, careful to keep herself both out of sight and downwind. The attackers turned out to be a trio of genin from AIM. AIM, as in Nagato. As in pain. Shit. Wait. No. This could be a valuable opportunity. If she could get these guys to send word back to Nagato, maybe warning him about Obito, then she might be able to mitigate some of the damage the Akatsuki would cause in the future. Maybe. No, that was a stupid idea. These guys wouldn't tell Nagato anything just because she told them to. She'd need a little insurance. Settling down on the conveniently wide tree branch, she pulled her Fuinjutsu kit from her seal. Unrolling a paper tag, she dipped her smallest brush into the ink. Compulsion seals were tricky. She normally used seals to negate actions, not encourage. It was just easier that way. It cost less chakra and did less damage to the minds of her victims, opponents. A compulsion seal involved implanting a foreign desire into an otherwise sound mind. If the afflicted noticed the compulsion, well, everyone knew what happened to Rin. Why couldn't she have been reborn back then? She could have completely circumvented all of Obito's nonsense just by saving one person. Ah. So, the compulsion had to be subtle enough to go unnoticed but strong enough to be obeyed. How to do it? Maybe, targeting Conan would be better. She was less stabby. She didn't want to kill the poor kids. She was also more likely to be seen in public than Nagato or his peens. Yeah, that could work. Decided, she began outlining the basic components of the seal. So, when whoever got this thing saw Conan, they'd be compelled to speak to her. She was nice. Sort of. And these guys were kids, so she'd probably listen. Looking over the framework, Hanako sighed. Making people do things was one thing, but making them say things. The sounds of fighting intensified and she knew she was running out of time. Hastily adding in a phrase she hoped would make sense, she added chakra to the seal to activate it. Now, all she needed was skin contact. Looking down at the aim genin below her, she called up her silk threads from within her seal and launched them down. The chakra-laden strings wrapped around an unsuspecting boy and pulled him up. His scream alerted his teammates, of course, but it also alerted hers. Team 7 was upon them before they could come after her and Hanako made her way up higher in the trees. A swift hit to the temple had the boy unconscious and she quickly undid the fastenings of his khaki bodysuit. Rolling him over, she pressed the seal between his shoulder blades and filled it with chakra. The longer she held it there, the deeper the seal would adhere. Once she was confident it lay on the lowest layer of dermis, at least, she redressed the boy and tied him to the tree trunk. Naruto scrunched his face at her when she joined them down below. Hana-chan, you knew there was a genjutsu. He crossed his arms with a huff. Why didn't you say anything? Ma, she said with a shrug. I didn't want to risk tipping them off. I found them, didn't I? Naruto grumbled, clearly still dissatisfied. Sasuke regarded her coolly before turning to his blonde teammate. Go and grab their scroll, Dobi. The tower is right there. The tower. Hanako felt her body drooping at the thought. Soon, she'd have a hot bath and fresh food. Momiji leapt onto her shoulder, agitating a bruise and making Hanako hiss in the process. Yes, a bath would be wonderful. The girl opened her eyes, faint rays of sunshine disturbing her sleep. With a groan, she rolled over on her rough hay mattress, pushing herself up with chubby hands. A rose-spun blanket fell from her shoulders and pooled around her waist as she rubbed at her eyes. Yakiru, I thought I told you to get up already. A young woman stood on the other side of the room, a basket balanced on her. Her wavy brown hair was pulled back away from her face and covered by a tattered bandana. The blue of her kimono complemented her peachy pale skin, setting off her black eyes beautifully. Mama, the girl said with a poorly stifled yawn. I'm tired. The woman laughed gently, the action revealing a charming gap between her two front teeth. I warned you not to stay up so late. This is your punishment. Now, get up. You don't want to miss your papa, do you? Yakiru perked up, exhaustion forgotten, and flung herself from the bed. She pulled her overlong sleep clothes over her head and began rummaging through another basket next to the creaky bed. Her mother chuckled and stepped out through the only door, letting light into the one-roomed building. The girl struggled in her haste to put on a green shirt and semi-clean pants, tripping over herself several times. She ran a hair through the mop of curls on her head, finger catching futilely on knots as she tried to make herself presentable without a mirror. Giving up with a sigh, she trudged through out of the hut and into the sunlight, squinting as her eyes adjusted. There, across the way, stood her mother. She was looking up at a shadowed figure, expression forlornly resigned. She always looked like that when saying goodbye to Papa. The grass tickled the bottoms of Yakiru's bare feet as she crossed the clearing, her pace slowing as she grew nearer to her parents. Her father wore black, as always, his body concealed by an all-encompassing cloak. The face Yakiru had never seen was hidden beneath a veiled hat, the thick, gauzy fabric obscuring his features perfectly. Sometimes, in Yakiru's most private nightmares, her father took off the hat and had no face at all underneath. Ah, there she is, his voice was deep and soothing, bringing up memories of bedtime stories and half-botched lullabies. My little princess. Yakiru reached up and tugged at her father's sleeve. Papa, do you have to go? Can't you stay a little longer? He chuckled, placing his gloved left hand on her head and undoing all the work she'd done to tame her curls. Sorry, princess, I have to go. I'll bring you back a present. Promise. I promise. Oh, her mother sidled up to her husband, a theatrical pout on her lips. And what about me? Don't I get a present? Of course, her father said with an audible smile. Whatever you want, Rin. Hanako stared up at the dark ceiling, mind carefully blank. Nope. Nuhu. Not thinking about it. That is a problem for another day. Future Hanako can deal with it. Present Hanako is going to the kitchen. Dragging herself out of bed, not unlike the Yakiru in her dreams, she slowly made her way through the silent tower. Her team had made it to the tower with a day to spare, so all that was left to do was wait. There were other teams there, too, of course. Gaara's was one, the trio from Kumo was another, and they were all stuck in the tower together until the third day was done. Luckily, it seemed like everyone, sans Gaara, of course, was asleep, so she'd probably have the kitchen to herself. Dawn wasn't for another couple of hours, and she needed some time to collect her thoughts before she faced anyone. There was someone in the kitchen. Sighing quietly to herself, Hanako made to leave. Hey, wait a sec, you don't have to go. She turned around and met Konkuro's dark eyes. Ah, he wasn't wearing his face paint. They stood there, staring at each other, for a solid minute before Hanako realized she wasn't wearing her mask, either. Oh, well, can't be helped. She stepped into the galley-style kitchen, reaching past a still frozen Konkuro to open the fridge. Pulling out a tin of plain yogurt, she dug around in a drawer for a spoon. Whoa, kid, why the hell do you cover your face? Ma, of all the questions. You first, she said blankly as she hopped up onto a counter. Why do you paint yours? It was a legitimate question. All she'd ever found on the internet were fan theories, so hearing it from the source would be nice. He leaned against the counter opposite her, crossing his arms over his chest as he shrugged. It's part of the uniform, I guess. For the puppet corps. Yeah, well, that was underwhelming. She'd read something somewhere saying that traditional Japanese puppeteers wore similar makeup, so maybe it really was that simple. Your turn, he said with a surprisingly attractive smile. Why wear a mask when your face is fine? Ma, should she really answer this? He'd answered her, though. I look like my mother, she said, finally, carefully avoiding his gaze. I just got tired of seeing her in the mirror, I guess. The air between them felt stuffy and awkward and she immediately regretted her honesty. Silently, she ate her yogurt, scraping at the bottom for just a little more. Damn, Shorty, that's depressing. She snorted. It was a loud, ungainly sound that hurt her face. Yogurt stung her sinuses as she clutched at her face to stifle her laughter. She looked up at Konkuro, the older boy's face twisted in a wry smile. You don't know the half of it. His dark brows quirked. Oh, yeah, I bet I can guess. Oh ho. She let herself grin. Go ahead, then. Guess. His eyes lingered on her teeth just long enough for her notice. Placing a hand on his face, he put on a show of thinking. Let me see, your dad's Kakashi, so your mom's probably someone important, too, probably from a big clan, right? I don't think it's the Inuzuka. You're nowhere near as loud as that kid, and it sure as hell ain't the Hyuga or Uchiha, so, he snapped his fingers. It's the Nara. Oh, God, he was so wrong. So horribly, obnoxiously wrong. And, he continued, I'm guessing this Nara mom of yours probably died, right? Likely on a mission which brought great pride to your village, am I right? Ma. He looked so confident, too. Tisk. 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 Wrong. Ah. Quiet shock on his face was a nice change from the perpetual smug grin. Well, not entirely. My mom did die, just not on a mission. Was it okay to use her like this? Yukiru's stubborn revival aside, Hanako never really felt anything for the woman in her dreams. She only refrained from speaking about it because it made other people uncomfortable. And made her stand out. Oh, his head, grin already in place again. She nodded, adopting a forlorn expression and staring off into the middle distance. She was murdered. Kankuro froze, expression falling slowly. It was a long time ago, she continued, tone purposefully flat. I barely remember anything from before it, but, she met and held the Suna teen's eyes. I remember her face. I remember the blood, and the cold water of the river. I remember being trapped in a corpse's embrace. Idly, she began to wonder how much of this was trying to scare Kankuro and how much was just venting. I remember my father, finding me after that. So, no, she pulled her lips up into a smile, knowing full well that her pointed teeth were on display. My mother brought no pride to my village. Ah, had she overdone it? He was looking rather green. Ma, may as well finish what she started. I don't wear a mask to hide my face from others, like most people probably assume. I wear it to hide from myself. Poor Kankuro. He was so underqualified for that therapy sess. Oops.